And we are live. Wait, is it live?
We're here.
And we're live. Hello, my lovelies. Today we are here with the fabulous Seraphina Nova Glass to discuss our group book, which was On a Quiet Street. I'm very excited to get into this.
Me too.
Thank you so much. What do you prefer to be called? Like, do you go by Seraphina? Do you go by Nova? Do you go by Sarah?
I go, the Seraphina, the whole thing, yeah.
All right, Seraphina. Well, thank
My
you so
mother
much
gets
for
away with Sarah, but that's the only person.
My mom's like that too. My name is Melanie Christina, and then my mom has always called me Chris. And so most people who hear her call me Chris, they're like, "Who are they talking to?"
Yeah.
So I want to start out with asking what inspired this story.
You know, it's funny how often people ask, like, where do your ideas come from or what inspired your story? And my answer is really always pretty disappointing, because I think I just really think a lot about plot and characters and just start piecing interesting questions in my mind together, and it all starts to sort of formulate and take shape. But I never have some kind of divine inspiration where it came from, a person or an incident or anything like that. It's really a little bit less interesting than that. So there wasn't a big kind of inspirational story to tell behind it. I think I fell in love with Paige as soon as I kind of started envisioning her squirting down the paper boy and sort of who she was and her anger at her loss. Mm-hmm. That character, I think, even though maybe she's not, I think they're all pretty equal, considered the focal character all the time. I think she probably popped into my mind first as someone I wanted to explore. So I guess that's my best answer for just wanting to explore that level of angry loss.
Though
it's like,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Along what Melanie's question says, though, like, your characters are very vivid, and they're like, I feel like they're a huge part of what makes the story what it is. And so when it comes to actually developing, coming up with your ideas, but also developing characters, like, how do you get these characters, or like have an idea of what kind of character you want to go towards?
I don't think a lot about that in advance. I think probably, like, my background is playwriting. And so in playwriting, it's so character driven. You don't have, scene changes, and they, you don't have the luxury of putting these characters anywhere in the world and having the backdrop or the atmospheric type stuff. You have to keep people interested on one stage with a few characters. So that character development is, everything. And so I think maybe it comes from that sort of background, because especially Cora, she changed for me. Like, I started writing her a certain way, and then she started morphing, and, she'd say something hilarious and I'd chuckle at myself. And yeah, she's got to say, she started getting a little silly almost, but I just kind of went with it. And I know it sounds so corny, but she kind of showed me who she was in a way. And so as soon as I have the outline and it plotted pretty well, I really let the characters flow. And I don't try to form them or shape them too early.
Cora was actually my favorite character. She was actually the only one that I actually really, really liked. And I was trying to channel Cora with my outfit today.
I love it.
Yeah, I really liked her character. And to me, she was the only one that was, even though she was being kind of told she was crazy, she was probably the most sane out of all of them.
Yeah.
Well, and that was what was really cool about your characters, was that at the beginning I had very strong opinions about them, especially Paige, and you it seems like you intended that for us to be like, oh, what is Paige? What is she? And then as the story progresses, they are much more complex characters. They have much different reasons for the things they're doing, and Cora becomes such a strong character, whereas she seems like such a weak character to begin with. And I thought that was really neat. And then Paige becomes such a sympathetic character, where in the beginning I'm like, oh, she's a horrible friend, she's doing these awful things, what are you doing with this character? I was so mad at first.
Yeah,
I get a lot of that. Yeah,
I felt Paige was a bit unhinged.
Yeah, I would agree with that, which is so much more fun to write, honestly. I know readers don't always love it, and they're like, why is she making a bad choice, or she's not likable. But I'm like, God, it's so much fun to write a character like that versus, I guess like, more of the typical straight-laced main character that, oftentimes, you want to have sort of like the token grounded normal protagonist often. But for me, I kind of go weird quite a lot. Maybe it's selfish, but I have more fun sort of creating that and digging into those quirky characters. So yeah, but I do understand. I'm glad that she turned for you at the end. That was definitely the goal. So
Yeah, with the whole the bathroom scene where she went way beyond where she was supposed to go, I was like, okay, is this going to turn into she's now trying to take Cora's husband? Like she was like, he's mine. I'm like, okay.
yeah, that was the hope, is that you were going to really question her and her intentions and hopefully mask. Well, you know what? That's we're doing this without spoilers, so I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to finish that sentence.
I got to remember that too. Thanks for reminding me.
So I'm about to say something, but I won't.
I have a couple of comments here and we can like discuss them. So, and hopefully none of these will trip you up too much. I wrote, my heart was racing when Georgia tried to make it to the bank and back. That scene when she was like, she had paused the thing and she was trying to like desperately get to the bank, and then the whole thing with the ID. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And then when Cora left Lucas a message, I was like, no, oh no.
Me too. Yeah, for sure.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That stressed me out. My heart was racing.
Good. Those are the moments that, you want to, I don't like reading stuff like that, but I like writing it. When I'm reading it, I'm like, you have no control, but when you're writing it, you know what's going to happen. It's a lot less stressful.
As I mentioned, Cora is my favorite character. I felt really, really bad for her a lot of the story. And I absolutely hate Flynn so much. Like total dog.
Yeah.
And he did not get better at all. He just remained a dog the entire time.
Gaslighting.
Oh yes, the gaslighting.
The worst.
I hated him so much.
Well, I loved how you elevated the women, and then you showed how awful these men were. These men who have huge positions in power, like Lucas, or like you just showed that a lot of times women get the shit end of the stick. So, like,
I think it was important to make sure Grant was a really stand-up guy because of that. I wasn't, it's like funny because people are like, well, do you like hate cops because all your books are so incompetent? And I'm like, look, not at all. I just can't have an amateur sleuth. If the cops were doing their job really well, the crime would be solved, and my amateur sleuth couldn't be skulking around trying to figure it out. So unless I want to get into police procedurals and really understand that side of things, which I'm staying away from, the cops always look a little incompetent because I can't have them, on top of the case. And I think the same with men. I'm trying to balance that out, certainly by having a character like him and making sure that it's not like this demonization of men at all. The story needs to be that way, to, like you said, elevate the women and create that female friendship and those bonds. But yeah, so I hear what you're saying.
So I have some questions about your writing. So like, when did you want to be an author? Like, at what age were you like, that's what I want to be when I grow up?
This age, almost. It really wasn't the dream or goal. It came upon kind of suddenly. I tell this story a lot, so I'll kind of nutshell it. But in 2019, I just decided to write a book out of the blue. I was listening, actually the narrator for this book, On a Quiet Street, Imogen Church. I had a commute back and forth from the university where I was teaching, and I started listening to my first audiobook, my first thriller. I was more into literary fiction and stuff like that. And I was like, and she narrated it. So the fact that it came full circle and she's narrating mine is a whole other story, but she's so great. And I listened to it and I'm like, I want to write a thriller. And so I was directing a play at the university. So I was there every night for rehearsal. So when it ended, it was October 2019. I just wrote a book in 3 months. By Christmas, I was finished with it. and then I had to wait till the holidays were over to start pitch it. And then I started pitching it to agents, and I got like 6 agent offers, and I went with the one I liked the best. And by a couple weeks later, we had a multi-book deal without even having further ideas. So it was very whirlwind.
Wow, that's incredible.
But I mean, I was writing other stuff. I was doing Hallmark Christmas movies. I was kind of doing some screen, short film. I mean, I was getting into writing, but had never thought about a thriller before. It was just sort of kind of fell in my lap a little bit.
Oh, so you actually ended up answering like 3 of my questions with that one.
Good. That worked out.
So I was also going to ask, when did you start writing and how long did it take you to get published? And yeah,
Very
that's
quick, yeah.
incredibly fast. That's wow.
It is.
Which book was your first one?
Someone's Listening, and then Such a Good Wife, and then On a Quiet Street was my third, and I just finished. My 6th just came out, but I've written 2 since then. So I just finished number 8. I'm starting number 9. But
this your 6th?
Yes.
I was gonna say, I think this is the one that just came out.
Yeah, last month. And it feels fast. It does, but in a way, it's such a slow moving business. Like, I feel like nothing ever happens here. I wrote 1,000 years ago because, I'm finished with it like a year before it comes out. And then you're already on to the next couple of things. And so, although it seems fast, it also feels very slow on my end when, it just takes so long in the publishing industry, which is just how it is. But yeah.
What was the process like trying to find an editor or the people that are supporting you through making this process?
Oh, well, the book deal is with HarperCollins. So since it's a big 5, I don't have to.
Okay.
I don't have to worry about covers and editing and marketing, and it's just there's a team and it's all done for me, which is great because I don't have any of those skills at all. So I would never be a good self-published type person. I'm very blessed to be with a traditional publisher because.
So you knew right off the bat you wanted to go with traditional instead of self-published.
I never considered self-publishing just because that wasn't the dream. Once I've always been into writing and playwriting even in college, but once I decided, if I wrote a book, I'd want to see, I'd want to feel like I was traditionally published, I guess mostly because I have no idea how to even conceive of a cover and editing and all that stuff on my own. But also it's just, there was some kind of sexiness about, the idea of, I guess, having that sort of validation behind you that, we believe in this book, a team of people believe in this book, and we're going to do all the stuff that you're not good at. And I think I wasn't necessarily locked into one of the big 5. My agent did talk about like maybe Amazon direct type publishing or smaller publishers perhaps, but we decided to start there. And then, thankfully we got an offer and it's going well still. And we're still with the same publisher today.
Perfect.
So you were doing the playwriting and all that. Are you still doing that? Or have you taken writing to full time?
Yeah, it's full time now. I actually was teaching at the university for 10 years, and my last semester was last fall. So this is all I do now is write full time, and I have plenty of deadlines ahead of me, so it's a good thing. It's a good thing I've kind of cleared out all the other stuff.
So one of my other questions is actually, do you have like a set writing schedule? Do you do the 9 to 5, this is when I'm writing, or is it just kind of as the thoughts come to you?
Yeah, I wish I did. I really should probably think about now, especially as things are ramping up. But I don't. I actually can go weeks without working on anything. I'll just be doing other stuff, and then I'll be like, oh, I know I need to pitch a book by this date. I'm going to start thinking about ideas, and then once I have a deadline, I kind of know how long it'll take me. And if they're giving me a year till my next book, and I know I write it in 3 months, I'm very willy-nilly with my writing schedule. I might get on a tear and just be writing every day for a few weeks and get a big chunk done. And then I'll be sick of those people, these characters, I need a break. And I'll take a week off and work on something else. So it's not regimented. I might have to change that, but so far it's kind of been like when I feel like it. But now that I'm not teaching and I don't have that other stuff, I think it might morph into a little bit more of a scheduled thing, because it's kind of getting a little bit bigger than my willy-nilly schedule can handle. So I'm sure that'll change.
Do you work on more than one book at a time, or do you focus solely on just the one?
I have focused solely on the one so far. Now it might be where I'm kind of outlining one and working on one and editing one. So there is some overlap at this point, but until this point, I can't split my attention like that. I really need to stick with, you know, and I think that's why I like to write them quickly. Generally in the past, they've been a 12-week process because if I get too far away from them, I lose the momentum and kind of forget, the little quirky, sort of details about who they are and things that I knew I wanted to add. And so I try not to get, I don't know, more than a week or so of like any separated time from the book that I'm currently working on.
Okay, I was wondering because you were saying how like you might get sick of these characters and need a break from them, and then you go and do something else. I didn't know if you go and work on a different book.
No, like The Yard. Or like something else, meaning, just a workout, new workout yoga studio, just kind of like just a break in general.
Do you have like a set place that you do all your writing? Like you sit at your desk and do your writing, or you go to Starbucks and do your writing, or do it all in bed, or?
Yeah, that would be nice. No, I really usually am in my office in this room in the back of the house where The Yard is right over here. And I can keep an eye on my little dog back there. So I think that's just, I need the quiet. I used to be that person who would have to have the noise and the life around me in a Starbucks or something would be great. And now in my older age, there's just no way. So we have like a little gazebo out there. So I might sit outside or maybe in another room in the house with my laptop. But generally I'm sitting right here. I'm on a desktop computer at my desk in my very quiet room with my cinnamon candle and my dog sleeping. And that's just my happy place where I get the most done. So yeah.
Your cinnamon candle, nice. Do you have like a go-to snack or drink that you have with you whenever you're doing your writing?
No, I'm one of those weirdos. I'm actually pretty raw vegan. So I'm like 99% raw fruits and vegetable diet. So I have some snacks. I mean, I'm always with a smoothie, like with a kale smoothie, basically. So or coffee, I guess. I mean, I think coffee time in the morning, I drink coffee is productive. But yeah, that's my quirky fact is my weird diet. So I don't have any kind of junk food or snacky stuff like that gets me through, if that's what you mean.
And are you a planner or a plotter?
Planner.
Huge.
Yeah.
So you like to outline everything out?
I can't really start until that's done. I need to know where it's going. I need to know that there's no major holes, that the middle's not going to sag, that there's like a little, hopefully, ideally, like a little cliffhanger on the end of each chapter. I just don't want to guess. And I talked to an author recently. I don't meet a lot of other authors, but we were on this trip and there was another guy there and his process was so different than mine. We were just giggling at like how different we write. And he said he's been hundreds of pages into a book and then realizes it's not really going anywhere. To me, it's a gamble to not know what you're writing to and if it's going to work out. So bless the people who can do that. I'm not one of them. I don't think I could be. I think I almost spend more time on the planning and the plotting, outlining than almost the book. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but that's how it feels sometimes. It really needs to be thought through.
I think that was something. Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask what author were you talking about?
Oh, his name is Brian O'Sullivan. He's fantastic. We were on a reader cruise together. Oh, and cool. So there were a bunch of readers that came on this Virgin cruise last month, and him and I were the two authors. And he's so good, but he's just so opposite of like I'm saying, our methods are so different. And so you think, not that I ever thought anybody wrote the same way I do, but we were both kind of marveling at like how different our approaches to it were. And I think that's incredible. Somebody who can just trust themselves enough to go in, and most of the time it works out. Obviously, he has multiple books that have done really well, but I suppose when it doesn't, you're like, that would be tough.
Yeah, I think that's where I was really curious about, because thrillers and mysteries in general, like you depend on those twists. You depend on everything tying back to something in the past, something, and that just seems so complicated. And I was curious about your process because I imagine there's so many loose ends that could get dropped easily, especially when the details are so specific to what actually happens in those twists and those turns. So, like, do you have outlines? I mean, I know you plot and plan, but do you actually, how do you keep track of where you need to tie back to different ideas and concepts in the process of creating these like twists and turns throughout a story?
Yeah, I have an outline, and then I have, the document, and then I'll also have like notes. And I'll say, oh crap, like just make sure in chapter 3 he says this, and you got to tie this in at the end, and make sure that he explains why in chapter 2 he took the shoes, and that's why she couldn't put them on to go outside in the ice, and that's why she got pneumonia. Whatever, that's not the thing. But I'll write a note to myself in the notes document to make sure that I tie that up. And then when I go back through it at the end, I'll have multiple notes like that. And most of them I have not tied up. Thank God I've kept that. And then getting a few eyes on it, even before it goes to editing. I have a wonderful woman who I send my manuscripts to. And she is, the things she catches, she told me once, I think it was in the vacancy in room 10, she's genius. She said, this sentence you didn't need this, he said, one of the characters said something to the other, and she's like, this is the moment that I knew who the killer was. And I get what you were trying to do. You were trying to maybe give a nugget early on, so when it came back around, you felt like you don't want it to be too much of a shock where the reader was like disappointed because you didn't give any clues. It was just too out of left field. So I was trying to leave a little nugget, but she said, but then that's when I knew that it was this person. And it was brilliant and beautiful. And I took that out, and she was absolutely right. I feel like she saved the book in many ways. I guess I rely on a few people I trust that will catch stuff like that, because I'm too close to it at some point, and I know what I meant, and I know, what the plot is. And so I might not realize that's there, or that I maybe said too much or didn't say enough. So I think having a good editor and a few people to read it back is important too. And of course my notes that I keep throughout.
Yeah, because it's always like kind of disappointing if you're reading something like a thriller or something like that, and chapter 2 or 3 you're given too much of a nugget, and you're like, well, I've known who this was the whole time.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. I mean, I think writing's hard, and knowing where that edge is of how much to give and not giving enough, it's just a difficult thing to balance. And so I think, sometimes you read a really, really popular thriller. There's a couple that come to mind for me that I was like, man, I mean, and good. I mean, they're older, and I'm glad that they were wildly popular, but I'm like, I feel like that information in chapter 2 or 3 gave it all away, and the whole time I knew, but not everyone's going to feel like that. We all pick out, things differently. And it is a hard thing to manage. So you're hoping that through the editing process, enough people, catch something or whatever to make sure that it has that polished finish, but doesn't always.
Right.
It's a finicky little thing.
So you said that originally, as a reader, you were a literary fiction reader, and you've gone down this thriller path. Like, how did you get there? And are you ever curious about going and really diving into literary fiction at some point?
I think there is a curiosity there. It's a good question. I feel like, I had a friend say the other day, isn't it weird to I tried reading a regular book, and when no one was murdered, I'm like, I don't get it. Like, you jump into a genre for so long. It is a little weird to read a book and no one gets murdered. So, but I was just reading a new Barbara Kingsolver book, and remembering why I love the genre so much. And I used to really love James Baldwin and Michael Cunningham, and reading all kinds of pretty deep, heavy fiction. And I still read it probably more than I read thrillers. But there's something I think so fun and engaging about the escapism in a thriller. The world is so insane, and it's just, to me, so much fun to write them instead of maybe the deeper stuff right now, the great American novel. That might change at some point. But yeah, I'm kind of happy with where things are now, though. So,
Are you curious about possibly writing any other genres like romance or a mystery, like a thriller romance, or
I, I, I did think about romance, but it's funny because I did write like 6 Hallmark Christmas movies. None of them got made. All of them got optioned, and I think a few of them are being repitched again, like repackaged. So they're kind of out there. So that was a little bit of my background. But then my agent and I were having a conversation about it, and I decided maybe to give it a try, and I wrote the first few chapters. And I think this echoes to what I was just saying. She read it and said, I like it. It's working, the dialogue, the banter, but I feel like there's something about your voice. Maybe it's a little edgy where I keep expecting somebody to get murdered in this. It's just, and I'm like, well, that's not the goal in a rom-com. So I think it wasn't working. I don't know.
maybe
I don't.
a thriller romance kind of mashup where
I have never really thought about that. I don't think I've ever read one, so I wouldn't even know where to begin. I don't know. It hasn't crossed my mind. Maybe. I'm not opposed to anything.
so we actually have a question here for you. Which of your books is your favorite and why?
Probably Vacancy in Room 10. I think this latest one, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Nothing Ever Happens Here that came out last month. I think it's more of a mystery. It's a little bit more character driven, but it has 5 elderly folks in a retirement home trying to overly involve themselves in this murder. And I just fell in love with writing these quirky characters, the way they interact with each other. It probably leans a little funnier than you'd think for a thriller. But I just had so much fun with it. And I think that's the place that I often come from. It's like On a Quiet Street is, it's the book that got a movie deal. And so it's the one I think people kind of go to. But I think it's not that I don't like writing the kind of suburban women and these 3 characters. I did fall in love with writing them. But when I kind of get to be a little bit, I don't know, I always say let my freak flag fly when I'm writing these other ones that were really atmospheric at the rundown motel and the quirky characters that live there. It's just kind of a rich, atmospheric, environmental sort of story. And to me, it just speaks to me a little bit more. I'm more engaged with it when I'm writing it. So I think those 2 are tied for my top 2, Vacancy and Nothing Ever Happens Here.
Okay. What are you currently reading? Or are you reading anything?
Yeah. Well, I just finishing the Barbara Kingsolver. And what did I just put in my basket? Alice Feeney. What is the name of the book? Beautiful, Ugly, I think.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So I should know that, but I haven't read it yet. I just put that in my Audible. I usually listen to my books on my long dog walks because I'm in front of the computer enough. So I'm not always reading a hard copy. I just put that for my next start. And I'm finishing the Barbara Kingsolver.
Okay.
Do you find that when you read other thriller authors, you are hypercritical, or that you go, oh, that's interesting, or do you feel like, that was a little too obvious? Like, how do you actually, when you're reading other thriller authors, are you more critical because you're writing thrillers?
No, I think I'm always in awe of almost all other authors. I really just think it's so hard to do. And I don't meet very many. And so when I'm listening to other author books or reading other authors, I'm kind of rooting for them. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's such a great twist. And, I feel like there's nothing but love and support in my heart when I'm reading other thrillers and want them to be good. And they usually are. I'm pretty picky with the ones I choose. I'm not just somebody who's reading everything. I think you get a little burnt out on it when you're writing it all the time, especially when I was teaching and also reading papers and student plays and stuff like that. It's like the last thing I want to do. And now I'm getting back into it more. And I generally am and have really positive reactions to other author books.
Do you have any book recommendations for people that have enjoyed your book or that you're enjoying that you suggest people read?
There's I want to say is it Mary? Is it Anna Lou Weatherly, I think that's her name, has this detective series, and I hadn't heard of her. And then I looked her up and saw how many books she had, and that they're all doing very well. And I didn't know how. I'd never heard of her, and I think they're fantastic. I really, really am enjoying her writing. And Claire McIntosh is a favorite. Lisa Jewell's my favorite author. I really just love everything she's ever done. I like how she moves into sort of, I don't know if you'd call it sort of literary fiction. I hate the term women's fiction, but maybe that's how they're generalizing it, and thriller. And she sort of seamlessly can do both. I think she's a special talent. And Tana French. I'm not saying that's an author I would say is similar to me. She's not at all, but just a really special kind of talent there too. So those are the ones that come to mind.
I actually have a book recommendation for you.
Oh, do tell.
Just from listening to you. So I don't know if you've ever read any Dean Koontz.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while.
So Lightning by Dean Koontz.
Okay.
It's kind of a little bit of a mystery thriller, a little bit of a romance, and a little bit of sci-fi.
Okay, interesting. I'll have to check this.
Probably one of my favorite books by him. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I think it would fit with, I think, what the kind of things that you seem to like to read.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. I'm going to check it out.
Let me see if I have anything else on my list here. I'm trying to think of questions as we go. What about you, Amy?
I think that we answered a lot of the questions that I had. So can you give us a little bit of an idea of what your upcoming books are going to be generally about, maybe?
Yeah, so the next one is called Too Close to Home, and it comes out next spring. And it kind of falls back in line with a similar feel to On a Quiet Street. It follows three characters, the same, two first person, one third person, because I really enjoyed doing that multi-perspective, multi-point of view in a lake community. And I think the main, I guess, it's very hard for me to talk about these without spoilers. I start to realize when I'm being interviewed, but the main character's husband died 2 years ago, and she goes to her kid's school play and sees him sitting in the back row. And it kind of sort of takes off from there. And another woman accidentally kills her neighbor and is covering it up for most of the story, but the two are very linked. And then there's a third perspective. So it's very much kind of following the three interlinked stories of how they each have their own secrets and mysteries they're following. They're telling each other a lot less about what's happening in their lives as in On a Quiet Street, where they were a little more girl power, I guess you could say. They're keeping their secrets closer to the chest. It's probably a little more plot driven and fast paced than the couple ones previous that were maybe more, I guess, character driven type. So yeah, that's next spring.
Shell says that's her favorite Koontz book as well. Lightning.
Yeah. So I have not read a ton of thriller, to be honest. And so I was like, oh, how am I going to experience this book? Because I have read some, but I haven't read a ton. And so going into this, when I first got into it, especially with the characters that were so questionable at the beginning, and I was like, oh, am I going to like this? But as the story went along, I really just started enjoying, like you said, the character development, but then also just the direction the story went in. And I do love twists and turns. And so I'm excited to read more and take some of your recommendations as well. But also just, this was a lot of fun for me to get a chance to dip my toe into a style that I don't tend to read that often.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because I really enjoyed it. So I'm really looking forward to reading more of your books and getting a chance to hear more of your voice through these different, like you said, different types of books. Like this is not necessarily, you enjoyed making it, but this is not necessarily as creative maybe as some of the other ones you like to kind of, the different ideas, the concepts. And so it'll be fun to see how that plays out reading some of your other books.
Yeah, definitely. They're all pretty different from one another.
I will say that ending was intense.
I actually went, oh, And my cousin was visiting, and she was like, "What?" It was the book. I verbally emoted. I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
That's
It
what
was
you
awesome.
want to hear. That's great.
Yeah.
I love when I have a physical reaction to what I'm reading, whether it's got something that's got my heart racing,
Mhm.
or makes me cry, or makes me go, "Oh my god!" And
Yeah.
that end was one of those like, "Oh my gosh, that wow, that happened. Oh wow."
Yeah, since I used to drive and listen to my audiobooks a lot more than I do now because I'm not commuting anywhere from this room now, but I would be pulling into the garage and I remember having my garage moments where I couldn't stop listening and then the twist came and I'm sitting there going, emoting out loud as well. Those are the best. I mean, that's a book you remember when you feel that way. So I'm always looking for that next read that has a little bit of that in it.
Yeah. I had one of those moments. It wasn't a thriller. It was actually it's supposed to be a rom-com. It was a romance. Um, and I'm driving along and sobbing, sobbing to this book until I got pulled over.
Oh no.
I was actually in the process of trying to like, because I was going somewhere, I was delivering something, and I was like, I gotta calm down before I get to these people's house. And so I'm like trying to calm myself down and wasn't paying attention to my speed and got pulled over for speeding. And the cop was like thinking I was crying because of the ticket. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Just there was a death.
They should have given you a break. It's totally
You should
understandable.
have, but yeah, you didn't. He's like, well, everything's gonna be okay. And I'm like, I know. I know. He thought I was upset about the ticket. I'm like, no, just give it to me.
Hilarious.
And I was like, I have got to stop reading these kind of books while I'm driving.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
I
I
have
do.
a slightly more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I do enjoy like a good thriller when I'm driving, though, because it's just like keeps
Yeah.
you like really entertained.
And I think thrillers make some of the best audiobooks too. Like,
Mhm.
but I have a more technical question. I don't know if this will have like if it makes any sense. But like I think pacing is it's so important when it comes to thrillers. I mean, for most books, but thrillers especially. Is that something that you have to actively think about when you're writing, or think about how like the pacing is developing throughout what you're writing, so that you get that big bang or that big thrill in that moment?
You know what's really interesting and tricky about that question is I think about pacing a ton. Um, I wouldn't say I obsess over pacing, but I'm definitely super aware of not wanting to let it drag too much. But no matter how hard you try to do that, what's fascinating to me about reading reviews, which I actually don't read anymore. I used to read them every day. I'd see what the reviews are. One person loves you, the next person doesn't, and it's such a whirlwind of emotions. I think anyone's mental health is probably don't read reviews, even if they're 99% good. You're still gonna, over that one. But one person will call the same book fast paced, page turner, and the next book will call it slow and boring, slow burn. And it's like three people call it a page turner, one person calls it super, super slow. You lose your mind if you try to figure out whether your book was fast paced or the slowest thing that anyone ever read. It's like you think about pacing, but the feedback is not helpful. It's very confusing. And so I think you just got to be true to like telling the story that you love and telling it, thinking about making sure that, like I say, I always like to have kind of a little bit of a hook or a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter. And being cognizant of that and making sure that it's moving along at a good pace. But the interpretation of that by others is always fascinating, So how much you think about it and obsess over it, it's going to be left to that objectivity of the reader.
Yeah,
I
I think
totally
if
get
I
that.
wrote a book, I would not ever read the comment like the reviews, because that I can imagine that would be so overwhelming.
Yeah, good and bad. I mean,
Yeah.
the people who like, yeah, it is. I think it's just better to feel like it's really none of my business. I feel like that these days. What you think of me is none of my business. I love what I do. I'm going to keep doing the next thing. If it's not for you, it's just fiction. It's not a big deal. Go to the next. If you love it, I'm glad I gave you some escapism. And I think you just have to, take a breath and look at it that way. And early in your career as an author, when, there's more books coming and you're just so intensely invested in the next thing and what people think, I think that's natural. But you get over yourself a little bit and are able to let that go and just dive into the work and let that be the important thing and not necessarily whatever single person on the planet thinks or not. So yeah.
So I know that this just came out. Nothing ever happens here. So I'm guessing you don't have anything coming out fairly recent, but when do you think your next book is supposed to be coming out?
Yeah, I have my next full-length thriller comes out next April, I think, March, April. I don't think there's an exact date yet. And then I actually wrote a horror novella called The Swamps that comes out in January. And so I have 2 out next year, both in the first quarter, like January through March or April, I think. But I don't think any of those dates are specifically set quite yet. It's still pretty early.
Are they available for pre-order yet?
Oh, The Swamps? No, I don't think either one of them are, because the title was just landed on, the title always changes generally, and there's no cover art or anything. I think it's really too early for either of those to be on pre-order yet, but I would think like within the next 60 days they would be. I think that'll be about before summer they should be on pre-order.
So everybody keep your eyes out for that. Somebody said Too Close to Home isn't on Goodreads yet.
Not yet.
Okay, because next April, it's a year from now. Or, yeah, about.
We'll check. Yeah, I think they just gave me the title like last week, so it seems very early, but I'll look. Yeah, no, not yet.
Well, keep your eyes out for that. Pre-order and support this lovely author. I want to thank you again, Seraphina, for joining us and taking some time out of your day to chat with us. I know we all enjoyed your book, and I'm looking forward to reading this one as well. Nothing ever happens here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure to talk to you guys. I appreciate it.
Me too.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you, Amy, for joining me and co-hosting along with me. For those of you here in the comments, thank you for being here. And also make sure you join us at 8 p.m. Eastern time for our after hours live show and hanging out and all that good stuff.
Fun.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And until next time, remember to be completely you. Bye.
Bye.